Good morning, everyone, and happy Monday. Good to have you all here. I want to talk to you about a few things that have been taking place. One of them is, breaking news. Remember how we were talking about where the virus came from? Well, apparently, folks, brace yourselves. It might have come from a laboratory. Now, breaking news, right? Um, I'm half joking because a lot of you know who've been watching the show for a while that I've been saying that since like 2019. I can't remember when the documentary did come out. I think it was like early 2020 or late 2019. That was, of course, looking into the origins of the virus, and lo and behold, there's a new report that came out that was kept from the public. It was a military report, and this report details the information the military was getting, and lo and behold, it's pretty much everything we were talking about from the get-go. Anyways, what's happening now is something else interesting, though, which is the author of the report, the Proximal Origins report, that was used to try to debunk everybody who was saying otherwise, including myself, actually. I was personally pretty heavily attacked for suggesting the virus might have come from the Wuhan Institute of Virology. This Proximal Origins report was used by Dr. Fauci, by the NIH, by the World Health Organization, by a lot of different organizations, by the media establishment, by big tech, as a way to and by most major media outlets, as a way to try to discredit anybody who said otherwise. The science is settled. The science has determined that it was not a lab leak origin. The science is settled on this, and how dare you question it, you conspiracy theorists. That was the narrative that came out. And they, of course, used that not only to call people names and criticize them, which I don't really care about personally, but they used it as a way to actually deplatform, censor, and directly attack people in their ability to explain what actually took place. And this is an unfortunate trend we're seeing in our society right now, where debate is no longer allowed. Going back to that Dr. Hotez guy, the one who was supposed to, Joe Rogan asked him to debate on his show. He's one of the big vaccine pushers, asked him to debate with RFK Jr. Not only did he refuse, but he retreated into his corner and started posting articles nonstop, basically attacking Joe Rogan, attacking RFK Jr., while claiming he's the victim. Imagine somebody punching somebody else, right? Punching somebody else and screaming in pain while they punch them. That's what this Hotez guy is doing. He's acting like he's the victim while he attacks people. But you see this as being a trend with these things. And what the media establishment has done, which is very interesting as well, is they've been repeatedly posting articles as well explaining why people should not bother to debate with the other side. Now, that's problematic for our society because you end up with situations just like this whole COVID disinformation narrative that just got blown out of the water, which is the people who are saying the science is settled, we don't have to debate, how dare you say otherwise, you conspiracy theorist, are the ones themselves who have been caught lying over and over and over again. And what's interesting now is that the House of Representatives is actually going after it. And I personally believe this is healthy for our society, if not only for, just getting the truth out about the vaccines and the COVID-19 origin, but also in terms of helping people understand that, yes, debate is needed, debate is necessary. And if you're told you cannot debate or question something, I'm telling you right now, it's not science. Let's have a look at this. Epoch Times. House committee subpoenas author of scientific paper meant to disprove COVID lab leak theory. It says the Select Committee on the Coronavirus Pandemic issued a subpoena on Friday demanding the private messages of Dr. Christian Andersen relating to a research study meant to disprove the COVID-19 lab leak theory. Subcommittee Chairman Brad Wenstrup, a Republican from Ohio, said that a subpoena had been issued for the documents and communications from Anderson's Slack messaging channel. So they're getting his personal communications, and hopefully we'll find out what was happening behind the scenes. Remember, on the background of this, There was, it appears, some collaboration from the NIH, direct communications on private chats with with this individual and others. And it appeared that most of them privately, in their own private chats, believed the virus may have come from a laboratory. But in their papers, they said otherwise. And that brings up a serious question. If privately they believed one thing, but publicly they stated another thing, and publicly even stated things that tried to attack or disprove what they believed privately, what does that tell you? It means that they went against their gut instinct. It means they went against the facts that informed their own perspectives. And it means that for some reason, they felt it necessary to state something publicly that they privately believed was not true. And when they do that, there's a big question of, well, why? Why did they say something publicly that went against what they actually believed? And why did they do so while attacking people who believed what they also believed? Why would they do that? Now, under normal circumstances, the answer is simple. It's because, well, there's some kind of special interest. There's a reason that motivated them to do something that went against what they actually believed was true. And what that thing is, it's not clear still. We do know a couple big things. One is, well, the military now apparently believes the virus did in fact come from the Wuhan Institute of Virology. It's not conclusive, but they do state this. They also believe it's possible the virus was part of a bioweapons program in China, run by the Chinese military. They believe that the West, these laboratories, were not fully aware that the PLA, the People's Liberation Army, the Chinese military had become directly involved in these programs, and claims that while NIH and other groups were actually cooperating with these Chinese laboratories to help them develop what was in fact a bioweapon, or what they believe was a bioweapon, that they were kept in the dark about its true nature. Whether that's true or not, who knows? But we do know that Fauci and others were suggesting, at least publicly, that they were not engaged in gain-of-function research, the ability to add new functions to viruses, to make them more deadly, to make them more able to infect humans and other things, which they were in fact doing at that laboratory. And the other question is, well, why do they feel it necessary to lie about that, other than the fact that, well, that'd be illegal for them to be doing? They also believe that this was the horseshoe bat virus, the one I've been talking about since 2019. And what happened was this. There was a mine in China, and the miners at this mine, the people who were mining whatever ore was in there, died. They died mysteriously. They died from a strange virus. And the descriptions of that virus, the reason I was interested in it from the get-go, is because it sounds a whole lot like COVID-19. It sounds a whole lot like COVID-19, what it does to you. And they ended up sending scientists to this laboratory, and they recovered a virus. This was a virus, they claimed, from the horseshoe bat. Dr. Shi Zhengli, the Batwoman of China, was one of the main researchers on this. And they took that horseshoe bat virus and they were working on it. They were doing gain-of-function research on it. They were mixing it with SARS. They were mixing it with elements from even HIV, which could explain some of the weird elements we see with COVID-19, where it does appear to attack the immune system, immunodeficiency, and other things like that. And of course, the West, Dr. Fauci's organization and others appeared to be involved specifically in the research program around this, taking place at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Now that brings the question of this individual in his private Slack channel of what was he saying? What was he talking about? Epoch Times reports this is in relation to an academic paper titled The Proximate Origin of SARS-CoV-2, which Anderson co-authored and published in Nature Medicine in March of 2020. That was the paper used to attack me, by the way. The paper says the virus has a natural origin. Now, further, it states this. This is from Representative Wenstrup. We are following the breadcrumbs of a COVID-19 cover-up straight to the source. Hear that, folks? A COVID-19 cover-up. And why were they covering up the real origins of the virus? And he adds, Anderson played a pivotal role in potentially suppressing the lab leak hypothesis, and Americans deserve to know why this happened, who was involved, and how we can prevent the intentional suppression of scientific discourse during a future pandemic. And that goes back to the point I'm making here. The suppression of scientific discourse. What happens when you're not able to scientifically debate? When one expert and one narrative is propped up by the establishment as being unquestionable, and others within the scientific community, just as qualified or even more qualified, are attacked, maligned, fired, or otherwise for questioning it or challenging it. And I think that was one of the big problems we saw with COVID-19. The lack of discourse and the attack of conflicting, viewpoints. The attack on conflicting viewpoints. That said, folks, I don't know if you saw, maybe you did, maybe you didn't. There was an uprising within Russia, and this was the Wagner, what do we call them? The Wagner private military company, the PMCs, the main fighting force of the Russian military. Long story short, there was a very short-lived 24-hour. I don't think you'd call it a full coup, but it looked like it was going to be one. But there were individuals who declared war against Putin, and they were doing a march on Moscow, and it looked for a while like they were going to try to take out Putin. Let me show you. 24 hours after, this is what happened. BBC reports, for one long June night and a day, Russia's notorious mercenary leader, Yevgeny, I always read this stuff, so I never pronounce it. Yevgeny Prigozhin staged an apparent insurrection, sending an armored convoy toward Moscow and raising questions about Vladimir Putin's grip on power. The Russian president even accused his former ally of treason, embarking on an armed rebellion and a stab in the back of our country. But at the end of the day, the head of the Wagner group had called the whole thing off and ordered his men back to base. 24 hours, it was over. Now, he was promising a vengeance. Basically, this is what happened. There were growing tensions between the Wagner group, the PMC, and the Russian military, the main Russian, defense department, essentially. And it looked like for a while they were complaining that they were being sent to their deaths. They were not being given proper supplies. They were not given support, that they were being sent into very difficult environments without the support needed to ensure their survival. And it looked like they were getting very unhappy with the Russian military leadership. Given that situation, what happened? They were becoming increasingly tense with the Russian military. And to the point where it looked like there was going to be an uprising in general, actually. Regardless of what took place, it looked like there was going to be an uprising. The Russian military, the Department of Defense type guys, they launched what looked like rocket strikes or strikes on the positions of the Wagner group and killed many of them. And then you had the leader of that group make a public video, enraged, very angry, saying that they did this intentionally, they're killing us intentionally, and he declared war on the Russian government and Putin, and then made his march on Moscow. Now, it's not totally clear what happened during that time. There's conflicting reports. It's not clear what's disinformation and what's not, because there is a lot of disinformation when it comes to war. It does look like there were some actual encounters between the Wagner PMC and the Russian, regular forces. It does look like there were some firefights, at least there's suggestions of it, although others deny this took place. There were cases where choppers and, aerial craft were shot down. And now, basically, what took place in the end, Putin, gave them basically got rid of their crimes. It made it so they can leave without any bloodshed. They went to Belarus. Wagner Group is now in Belarus, and the remnants of their forces are being sent to Belarus. But you have the remnants of bad blood. And this is likely going to have a serious impact, one, on the potential of growing distrust within the Russian military establishment, which is very real. especially when you're dealing with former communists. They tend to have an inherent distrust of the intentions of others. And you're also going to have the other element, which is, well, Russia's most experienced fighters are no longer in the war. They're no longer on the front lines, which means they're going to be sending more conscripts. They're going to be sending less experienced fighters to the front line. And those fighters are going to be watching their back, thinking, are we going to be hit with the same fate as the Wagner group? Are we going to suffer the same fate? And will they betray us yet again? It's a very big development for them. We'll see what happens. That said, folks, let's jump over to Epoch TV exclusively. I want to talk to you briefly about how Republicans actually have a plan now. They're moving forward with something, and they're taking on ESG, environmental social governance. We've been talking for a while about how this environmental social governance system, BlackRock, Vanguard, how these investment organizations are holding a knife, hypothetically speaking, to the throat of America's major corporations and telling them, push the transsexual agenda, push the homosexual agenda, advance the Green New Deal agenda, essentially, right? And if they don't, they get a slap on the face and they get their ESG rating reduced and they lose money from their investors. And if they play nice, if they play along with the game of this group holding a hypothetical knife to their throats, well, they get more of those ESG brownie points and they get more investment. The problem we're facing now is that may in fact be illegal. These groups pushing the ESG agenda may in fact be breaking the law. And Republicans have now unveiled a plan to hold them accountable and possibly go after them with this. Let's jump over to Epoch TV for this. I'll explain, and then we'll go into questions as well. All right, let's jump over now. Thank you for being here, folks. Let me show you this. Epoch Times reports new Republican working group interim report. They have a report on it to explain what they're going to do. Takes aim at ESG, environmental and social governance. Meaning, first of all, they're suggesting governance, like governing, as in, a government rather than an investment.